Okay, I guess we're pretty close to 10 o'clock.
Noon,
Nooner,
a nooner.
a nooner. Did you have your nooner yet?
No,
No.
we're starting now.
Okay. So we've got 4 people here, so we have enough to have a meeting, hold a meeting.
And I know Doug is out of town.
Doug
which
is out of
why
town, and-
You're
And
conducting the meeting and.
Mark is also.
Oh, it's out of town again, okay. So anyway, let's go forward.
And here's Barry, so.
Oh, okay, so we're all set. Mary, good morning.
Morning.
Did you get one of these, Maria?
Probably still waiting for me at the post office. Thank you.
Okay, I will call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bell? Mr. Haw?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom? Mr. Gentili?
Yes.
Mrs. Goodman? Yes.
Okay. Next step, approval of the agenda as presented. Any changes? Everybody's had a chance to review it?
So moved.
So moved? Do I hear a second on that? A vote?
Yep. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Well, I guess public comment is vacant this morning, so we'll bypass that and go forward. And next item, approval of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting?
The motion to approve the minutes from last meeting?
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Vote,
Aye.
motion approved. Okay, next on the list is the treasurer's report. So everybody's got a copy of that, there's some extra copies here.
Since Rachel's not here today, I will entertain any questions you may have about any of the items in the printed reports.
Okay, Mary, I was just looking at HVAC repairs, that's something you mentioned last.
I mentioned it last month and the
Yeah.
bills came through this
Okay,
month.
Okay, that's what I thought it was. And just another question over here, maintenance hours moved up a little bit, was that because of the weather and extra some,
Yes, I mean,
Overtime.
this is probably more of a typical winter month.
okay,
Um, it's kind of been, you know what the weather's been like, it's kind of been nonstop for the last couple of weeks.
so out of curiosity, I was looking at that, was there any overtime paid, or were they just transferred in the straight time hours for this report?
Generally, we don't have any overtime,
Oh,
the way
okay.
we manage things, so.
That's a nice deal.
Does the board ever entertain budget adjustments or modifications? Because obviously repairs and maintenance are gonna be over this year.
Generally, we will do that towards the end of the fiscal year.
Like the 11th month to make sure everything's shored up for.
The exception to that where we might do it sooner would be, we don't have a lot of sway with things like maintenance. I mean, but if it was something that was above and beyond what the board had included in the budget, we would generally make that motion at the time we would have approved the expense.
Okay, any other questions? Comments? Do I hear an approval, request for approval of the accounts payable?
So moved.
Second,
Second?
vote?
Yes.
Don't we have to vote on that?
Yeah, we should be roll call.
Right, roll call.
Expenses.
Mrs. Goodman? Yes. Mr. Gentili?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Haw?
Yes. Next item, financial statement, reviewing expenses, balance sheet, etc. Any comments? Notes, questions?
Do you have a timeline, Barry, on when some of these expenses that are reimbursable, when you expect them to come back in, or?
I'll give an update on that in my report. But the shorter answer is I would expect probably in the next 30 days, we should see the significant reimbursement on the land acquisition being completed. There's two things on that again, I'll give an update a little bit later.
Now, one thing that caught my mind when I was looking through this is that the December disbursements, we're looking at 53,000 on this report here. By going back to the December one, we had 68,000. Is that just the fact that some of these bills haven't come through yet, even though we're anticipating 68,000 last month?
That I don't know. That would be something that Rachel would need to.
Okay, because there's like a $15,000 difference there.
Right.
Okay, any further questions on the balance sheet, comments?
Actually, I think since you mentioned it's $15,000, I think it's probably exactly that $15,281.53, the PFC expenses.
Okay,
But I don't know why that was not paid yet. But just looking at those numbers, I think the two of those together is the difference there.
okay,
Yeah, actually,
I just noticed that.
Yep.
Just a question. Comments on the balance sheet, questions?
Make a motion to approve the January 2019 financial statements as presented.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dunst,
Yes.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mrs. Goodman. Yes. Mr. Gentili.
Yes.
Okay, moving on. Next item we have on the agenda is delinquent hangar tenant payment. I think on the last meeting and notes and so on, we were waiting for some kind of payment by the end of January, otherwise Doug was going to give him a call.
right.
Did the payment ever come through or what?
As far as I know, no.
I
but-
haven't seen anything, so.
But Rachel would be, the definitive answer on that, but I don't believe so. She did not communicate that we received anything else, so
So I guess the next thing is for chat with Doug and
to reach out.
reach out.
And
You know,
we did talk about this last month.
Yes, we
The
did.
fact that he did pay a
Right.
payment on his balance indicates that he's aware of his obligation, and I think that helps
Yeah.
us in the long run.
And last time I said, I think we decided to just wait until the end of January and see where it goes. Go from there, we give them a lot of room, so we'll take it from there. Any other comments on hangar? Okay. Moving on, committee reports, discussion, executive committee. I think, go ahead.
I talked with Doug on this item last week, when he and I were talking about him not being here today, and he and I are going to get together when he is back from, I think he's in Tulsa today, and basically work on scheduling this with George. I've got some other communication that I've had with George on some other items, so we just need to get everyone's schedules aligned.
Okay, because I know that's kind of where you left it at the last meeting, per the notes and so on.
Yep.
So no further action on that.
Correct.
Now, everybody is aware of who's on the executive committee this time around, right?
It'll be Doug and you and who?
And Barry. Yeah, I think in the last minutes there, it should have been there listed. Budget committee,
Did not meet.
okay. And there again, the new people on that are Doug, Mr. Bergstrom, and you, Jeff. Bylaws committee, we didn't vote for members on that to reform it. We just said we'd form it up and do committee members when needed.
Okay. So
So,
we can probably drop
I was
that
gonna
from the
suggest that,
list of
right.
active committees since it's not currently a standing committee.
right. Capital Projects Committee, I know that didn't meet, and the new folks on that are Doug, myself, and Andrew, correct? Okay, any other questions on reports, committee reports, discussions, comments? Okay, we'll move on to airport director's report. Larry?
Hard copy. Okay, so fortunately, this time of the year when mishaps can happen, no incidents or accidents or anything negative going on the airfield for the last month. Basically, as it relates to the storm damage, the electrician basically is not going to complete that work until spring at this point, since some of it is digging and trenching work that needs to be done to solve one of the issues, so still on the agenda, but no progress is being made there during the winter now. On the fiscal year audit for the fiscal year that just passed, you'll recall we talked about this last month and we kind of had the auditor kind of at the last minute suggesting a different price than what we've been paying. Your direction to me was to go back and work with them, and we basically kind of negotiated a meet in the middle arrangement, which is the board's direction. So that audit field work was done last week. It was supposed to have been done the week before, but because of weather, got canceled and rescheduled a couple times. Finally happened last week. Not aware of any things that came out of that. But that's where that stands. I think the auditor was here in the morning and then I think spent the afternoon with Rachel getting the pieces that reside at the county. The winter conference for the Winter State Airports Conference is coming up next week. I put that out there if there are any board members that would like to attend. I know in the past there's been one or two that have attended that is in Lansing. And if you want to attend, let me know and I'll make any of the arrangements necessary to make that happen. I mentioned it to Doug last week when I was talking with him. I don't know if he will be attending or not, because I know he's got a lot on his plate right now. But just wanted to throw that out there, and I'll give you all an update next month as to what came out of that. Weather, as we all know, has been a big topic of discussion in Michigan the past 3 weeks or so. We've had now a number of canceled flights as a result of the weather, so our great track record is now a little bit less sterling, but there's only so much you can do when it comes to Mother Nature. Safety reigns. Last week we had canceled flights on Thursday and Friday. The airline, we don't normally have a Saturday flight, but the airline basically did a make-up flight on Saturday to accommodate those passengers that were inconvenienced the 2 previous days, although a majority of them ended up canceling. There was a group of 8 that was going down to see a show Thursday night in Chicago, and obviously when the flight canceled, they couldn't just reschedule. So they've all been given refunds accordingly to the airline's policies. In January, and I'll touch a little bit more on this in a second, but we did have 3 days that were canceled. 1 day was because Chicago was closed, and the other 2 days were weather up here, so that in total as of now, between January and February, there have been 5 days of canceled flights. The other impacts kind of touched on in the financial reports is a lot of extra hours as it relates to airfield maintenance and plowing and removal of snow. It doesn't matter whether we get a 1/4 inch or 3 inches, we have to basically go out and kind of do the entire airfield anytime we get a snow event. And in a typical year, with our lake effect conditions, that pretty much means can be every day throughout the winter. But snow is easy to work with because you just get rid of it. It's the ice, and that's the reason we really had a lot more canceled flights than is typical for the winter, is just because we've been a little bit warmer, and that's just been hitting that ice for us. And that, you know, Thursday and Friday of last week was that issues. And Thursday we were so close because we had the ice in the morning, our flights in the afternoon, and actually by the time the flight would have gone, things would have been fine here, but the airline was just too nervous looking at the forecast and all the conditions, so they canceled in the morning. Friday, it then rained all night and then froze overnight, and it was just a skating rink again on Friday. And then because it was so cold on Friday, even our de-icer wasn't effective, so we really weren't able to do anything other than kind of wait that out and apply a lot of de-icer, which is kind of my next point here, is that we've used more de-icer already this winter than any previous year that I've been here. We're basically out. We have basically enough for one application, so we ordered some over the weekend. So hopefully what we have left gets us through this week until we can get additional totes of de-icer fluid in.
Obtaining that's not an issue.
It shouldn't be. There was I don't know, I'll say 5 years ago, there was actually a nationwide shortage, but I've not heard anything to that effect.
Now, is this de-icer for the plane or the runway?
It is the runway. The airline takes care of the costs associated with de-icing aircraft.
Okay,
We're just responsible for the
so
runways.
this de-icer, I expect, is in liquid form?
It is
That's what
liquid,
we call it.
and the way we utilize it is we mix it with sand and then apply a mixture of both sand and de-icer, because it's fairly expensive material. It's probably about $1,000 to do a complete, full-scale runway de-icing mixed. If we were just to use it straight, you're probably talking $4,000 of material. So it just becomes cost prohibitive given our budgets and our conditions to do that, so.
Is this as cost effective or the same or less as if you use rock salt or?
We can't use any sort of corrosive material on the airport. So this is a special formulation meant for airports and pretty much only used for airports that's not
Oh, okay.
corrosive. It's potassium based instead of sodium based, which is very corrosive for aircraft. So that's one of the reasons, is there's a very narrow range of products we can use, and therefore the cost of it is higher.
And why you don't see rusty planes.
The other fact is that they're mostly aluminum too.
Yes, and they corrode in a
Still
different
corrode.
way, but they still corrode,
Right,
yes.
right, you're right.
When do you expect the de-icer shipment to come in?
We haven't heard back yet on a shipment date, but typically, normally we order in the fall and preparing for winter. Normally it's about a week notice, but
So what are you
Might
getting,
be different.
5,000, 10,000 gallons or what?
we get them in totes, and I think the totes are 300 gallons, and we get in 2 totes. And normally that's what we use,
Oh,
1 to
okay.
2 totes per winter, because we generally only use it 2 or 3 times.
Oh,
Yes.
the way you were talking, I thought we got like a tanker truck, 10,000 gallons. but
Nope.
you're only getting-
A tote is like $2,500
Oh,
for
okay.
300 gallons.
Okay.
Because with the storm tomorrow, and they're saying another storm Thursday, Friday,
Right.
possibly 2
And
storms
just-
next week.
All I'm hoping is that it's snow and not freezing rain. Because again, the only time we need to use this is if it's freezing rain, because there's no way else of basically getting the contaminant off of the runways. Snow, we've got lots of equipment that can handle that, so. But they are potentially for tomorrow's storm calling for snow, maybe switching over, then going back, so we'll see. moving on then, just a couple quick updates on some of our smaller grants. So we had a revenue sharing grant with the local revenue sharing board this past, basically a year ago, for 2 SCBA units for our firefighting equipment, because the ones we had were more than 10 years old and therefore out of, basically expired. We've recently finished the acquisition of those. We ordered one shipped, the other was back ordered for like 6 weeks, so basically both those come in. And I believe Rachel's done all the grant paperwork on that, because I know we've been paid that from that grant. And then we also had a capital equipment grant with MDOT last year for a snow, basically a parking lot pusher to basically, better clear snow out of the parking lot. And we can use it on the ramp and around some of the buildings as well. That's got in, and we submitted the grant reimbursement paperwork on that last week. So to your question, some of these smaller grants are in process right now.
Okay, good.
We still have outstanding our big federal grant for the land acquisition, and then we've got a $10,000 marketing grant with MDOT, and then there's a smaller grant, I can't think of what it is right now, that's also outstanding. Oops, let me go forward, because I have these in the wrong order in my here. So moving forward then to passenger numbers. So in January, we saw a 4% increase versus a year ago, and that's basically the first increase since back in August. So, and I'll touch a little bit more in my report on this, kind of showing a trend as to where we are on that. Already kind of hit on the performance. So 3 days in January, total of 6 flights, 3 in and 3 out were canceled, which were 8 or 11% of the flights of the month. And then there were 3 other flights that were delayed, in all cases, very small delays, like an hour or less. 2 of them were on January 1st, and then 1 other delay later in the month. So overall, a total on-time performance, not too bad, but those cancellations do hurt. But when it's weather and safety, people are generally much more understanding than they are in the summer, although it can be just as impactful to someone's plans and schedule. As I mentioned, that group that was going to see Hamilton in Chicago this past Thursday.
You do have a typo there, it should be 2019, that's far right.
Oh, yeah.
On-time performance, minor.
Cut and paste, love that. Looking at airfares, so from now going forward, at least as long as we're still offering our special $75 connecting fare, these reports kind of show that as the add-on fare to get from Manistee to Chicago, and then the Southwest or Delta fare connecting from there. So as it relates to comparison to last month, not a lot moved between last month and this month. Our average fare was down a little bit. Traverse City and Grand Rapids was up a little bit. Muskegon also down. With our affordable connecting fare, we again are competitive with other regional airports. That's really where historically is kind of a good spot for us. We're never going to be able to compete with the schedule and the availability out of Grand Rapids, and we need to be less than Traverse City and Muskegon. Otherwise, the challenges of flying out of here and some of the risks that one takes in kind of how you have to connect out of Manistee. You have to be saving some money really in order to make that justified. These fares are kind of showing that. For the month, the deals happened to be in Dallas and Houston, San Francisco. A few sales going out of Traverse City. Grand Rapids, as is typical, generally has the bulk of the best deals. Muskegon also for the month showed a couple. When you include 7 days of parking into that total rate with our free parking, that actually really shows the benefit of flying out of here and being able to save that money. Now, obviously that doesn't apply to everybody because everyone has different arrangements for how they get to airports. But if you are leaving your car, that does make a significant difference, and that puts us even at a competitive advantage to Grand Rapids for a number of flights when you include their parking. Obviously, they're the most expensive airport in the region to park at. So overall, that's good. It's winter. In the summer, when fares go up across the board, some of those differences become less noticeable. But right now, we're in a good situation. I don't want to do that. Back to what's next in your list. So just some capital project updates. So the land acquisition. So Rachel and Prina Newhoff have been going back and forth, corresponding to put together the total package on what is eligible for grant reimbursement, along with the paperwork necessary, from invoices to canceled payments, canceled checks for payment. So I haven't talked with Rachel probably in a week on that, so I don't know exactly where that stands, but I know I've seen the correspondence going back and forth between those groups. There's one piece, and I'm working with George Saylor on this, is we need a letter from our attorney, as well as the entire grant documents need to be basically filed with the county registrar associated with the deed for the property. It's one of the requirements for reimbursement under the grant, and George is working on that. So again, I anticipate a 30-day or so timeline to wrap this up and get that reimbursement. I'm still waiting to hear back for some draft documents from Prina Newhoff on the environmental cleanup piece that the board is aware of. Have not received that yet.
It's taken a while, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, a little bit.
it's, I think, lower on their priority than, I've had multiple conversations, and I'll, talking about this on the next slide here, with Prina Newhoff on the bigger projects coming up, but less on the smaller stuff. I don't have any update on our grant requests under the supplemental AIP program. I know there was a meeting, I believe last week, that involved state aeronautics, MDOT, and the FAA, and one of the topics on that agenda was this program. I haven't heard from the state anything, so I'm assuming nothing really was communicated as it relates to us in that meeting last week. And given the weather, who knows, I don't even know if that happened. So, we're kind of still waiting, but because of that, as I spent a lot of time last month talking about, we've now formally moved back our planned construction from May to now starting September 9th is the current working plan. So basically just after the peak travel and Labor Day.
That's good.
And actually this is starting then kind of the Monday after the weekend after, so
And we'll be able to access
kind
those
of
funds.
the middle of September is kind of a little bit of a lull. So it's not as much of a lull as May would be, but it is, still in looking at the construction season, that's kind of the next window of opportunity. I've confirmed with the FAA that they are okay with us delaying the pavement marking that they've requested, such that, again, I was telling you last month that there could have been scenarios where we would incur increased costs because of timing on that. They're okay with us pushing it back. So there shouldn't be any increased costs for us delaying. So hopefully some of these additional funds can come through, and but if not, we will go forward still this year under the original funding scenarios.
So that's gonna happen after the resurfacing project is completed.
Yes, yep. Or as part of it.
Right. But right there at the same time frame.
And instead, so the plan originally was that we would be basically soliciting bids right now for the May project. The plan now is to hit an April bid date for Aeronautics Commission approval in their May meeting, and then again with September target. If we don't hit that, there is July, so there's still another whole cycle with MDOT where this could all be done. I want to get it done as soon as possible, especially because on some of this stuff, I'd rather get bids in at the early part of the construction season as opposed to later when prices are gonna go up.
Well, the big thing is there's gonna be a lot of paving going on, and there's not as many contractors in that field as there used to be. So.
Right. So that's the update on that. The wildlife survey is ongoing. I occasionally see our USDA person here. Once a month they come out and count birds.
Good job.
TSA lease. So I had an exchange back and forth with GSA, and basically I've submitted a proposal to them after my research with other airports and also looking at what we're currently charging the airline so that we're not disproportionately charging different tenants, and have not heard back from them on that. The government shutdown, I think, has certainly impacted that during that time frame, and so I'm not really surprised. And again, since this isn't due to expire until the end of the fiscal year, there's not really a pressure other than the kind of pressure they were applying before the government shut down.
How did we compare when you looked at other airports?
Sometimes it's comparing apples and oranges because what gets included and what the needs are of a specific airport. Our former rates were in some ways higher and some ways lower, depending on how you looked. Our square foot rate was probably higher, but then they had additional fees that they had separated out that kind of balanced things out. My proposal, I don't remember exactly, but it's roughly a 15% increase from what the current lease is. Air service, touched on a couple of these things. So January, we were up 4%, again, our first increase since August. Other than weather canceled flights since Ultimate Jet started offering service in June, we've not had a single cancellation. February, we are trending up as well, although you get 2 days of canceled flights and 20, 30 people ultimately not flying, that can put a dent in what the ultimate month numbers might be. But right now, we're at a point where I'm expecting an increase, assuming we can operate. And then just kind of showing the recent trends. So in September, we were, versus year prior, we were down 30%, October down 15, November down 8, December down 7, and now January we're up, February I'm expecting to be up. You know, the trend is the right way. That corresponds to our change of schedule that we started in September. I think people have adjusted to the new schedule, and the negative impacts of that are past us. Been a lot of back and forth the last 2 to 3 weeks on our summer schedule. I've mentioned to the board that there's an anticipation of connecting service up to Traverse City that has been on the table, off the table, back on the table. And I'm actually, you know, I've got a draft here of what the summer schedule should be like. I'm actually very happy with how it has come out. I was not very happy with some of the previous iterations, which caused Traverse City to be out of the picture, but then they came up with ways to bring it back in that didn't negatively impact us. Overall, the schedule will resemble what we did a year ago. It is based around the number of passengers we handled throughout the course of the summer last year, with an opportunity to grow a little bit more. It will have a mixture of both 30-seat jet. We'll have at least one jet flight every day, and then the option of having the 19-seat turboprop fill in as we increase, as we need more. One of the challenges we had last year was in moving to a 30-seat aircraft. Historically, we've got numbers that show, oh, you know, we've had, you know, let's say between 25 and 35 passengers on a particular day. A 30-seat aircraft can accommodate that, but on those days where you maybe had 35, or last summer where we were sold out at 30, how much more demand is there that you're turning away? Is there double the demand? Probably not. With the 19-seat aircraft, we've got the ability to add an incremental bucket that's not as big and therefore not having quite the financial risk of not having as much demand as you would need to justify the extra flight.
Very,
Yep.
approved by DOT on the schedule.
Oh.
Have they had a problem? Is it normally just, here it is and approve it?
Normally, yes.
Okay,
Obviously, during the shutdown, that is one of the things that was not happening.
okay,
And hopefully, well, there's really a push to get this done this week
right.
in case they go back into shutdown, which, you know, who knows if that will happen, will not happen. You hear all sorts of different stories as to what could happen. We've got a window. We want to make sure that we have everything submitted inside that window and not rely on the government continuing to operate in a normal fashion after that. The next two things I repeats from last month, talking about the fare pricing. This last item is something that's new and just came up really last week. As we get into kind of the really core winter doldrums, there are a few days a week where it's really not fiscally wise to be flying a 30-seat jet when you've got 3 passengers. Jim Gallagher asked me last week if I would object to them subbing in a 9-seat aircraft on days where they may have just a handful of passengers. I said, as long as you're not canceling flights because of low loads, but you're still accommodating them, even if it's in a less desirable configuration, for the fiscal reasons around that, I'd be okay with that. So they're actually doing that this week, today, tomorrow, and Wednesday, although tomorrow is the first day that I recall in many years where we have no passengers on both flights. So that's obviously a no-brainer not to operate that. And again, that's kind of a byproduct of the cancellations last Thursday and Friday, we had passengers booked, but when their corresponding flight got canceled, the rest of their trip was also canceled,
So
so.
this plane is not a single engine one, is it?
No, no, twin engine,
What type aircraft?
King Air.
And I'm sure Doug would reiterate that, you know, if somebody's booking a flight and they're expecting a jet.
And
you know,
I am aware of that, and
Well,
it's
something more than
balancing
9 passengers.
different competing requirements.
Are there any major impacts as far as luggage weight requirement?
No.
So it's not gonna impact whatever they're to pack?
Comfort.
Nice airplane.
Probably
But,
better, because I mean, these would be corporate charter,
Oh, okay.
equipment, so you know, you're probably more comfortable, a little bit slower, probably a little bit bumpier because it's a smaller aircraft.
Sports car instead of a bus.
Right, so that makes it more fun.
On the marketing side, so last month I talked about, and I've talked about it earlier today, this $75 connecting fare versus our standard low fare to Chicago of $129. We've soft launched that. There's been no mention in it through any marketing channel. We're still working on some technical issues. For example, the calendar where you choose days to travel basically showed every day, even though we don't fly on Saturdays. And for some reason, half the people that took advantage of the service wanted to fly on a Saturday. So then it just becomes a bad or a less desirable interaction back and forth. When they request something, you say, no, we can't do that. So we got the calendar fixed. It was also, it had no end date, so people were requesting flights in summer, and we don't even have a schedule, so we can't fulfill those. So we're working on some of the things, which is why we did a soft launch. But I did kind of want to show, just so you can kind of visualize. So, as I said, we're not currently pushing this through any marketing, but it does appear on the website. So if organically you're coming to our website to book a flight, there's the standard booking view of this, which is just Manistee, Chicago. And then we're calling it North Country Sky Connect, and basically, basically just click through that, and it's basically going to ask you where you want to fly, what your travel dates are, etc. And
That's
then
better.
they'll go back. You'll get an email response with an itinerary, what a cost is, and go through that. And for some reason, it's not, website's really slow right now. But it's, I'm not sure why it's,
It could be, maybe it's a site, maybe it's the carrier.
no, this is all on our side up to this point, so I don't know. Well, so much for me demoing it. That always happens. Back to here. So we've been getting 1 or 2 inquiries a day, even though we have not been pushing it. I know we could jump that up at least an order of magnitude, 10 to 20 a day, if we actually started pushing it through our marketing channels. But until we get the kinks worked out, we don't want either to overwhelm people that are responding because they're getting a lot of invalid requests because of some of the data that we're not capturing correctly, or whatever other issues that we're learning as we go through this. So right now, we're in the middle of our Valentine's Day promotion, so 50% off all flights from Wednesday through next Monday. We didn't do this last year, but we have done this pretty much every year before that. We're already up to 25 people coming in on Friday, so we've been able to push the needle by getting some of these seats filled up as a result of this. And then we're working on our summer marketing plan, and now that it looks like we're fairly well confirmed that we will at least have one flight a day up to Traverse City, that presents some marketing challenges, because obviously we don't want to use our marketing dollars to be promoting the Traverse City Airport. But we dealt with this before when we did the Pelston connection in the summer of 2016. We had those same issues, and basically we need to make sure that whatever marketing we're doing is only focused on Manistee, and marketing dollars either that the airline or that the Traverse City Airport is contributing is mentioning that and directing them to, actually I would love it if Traverse City spent marketing dollars and told people to come to flymanistee.com. Probably not gonna happen, they're gonna be directing people to northcountrysky.com, but. So we're working on some of those specifics now that we are fairly confident as to what the product will be this summer that we're offering. And that's my report.
Thank you, Barry. Okay, moving on to old business. Coal road bin, billboard, no change, or where are we going on that, Barry?
No change, because as of the update last month, we're planning on basically hitting George up when we meet with him to talk about the contracts at that same time.
Okay.
So, I do have an update on airport zoning. So I've reached out to Rob Carson, the county planner, on this. I touched base with him a while ago, but I haven't pushed it since then, and I'm not sure his approach is the best approach, but I defer to the experts in the zoning and planning arena as to how to handle this. My goal was just to kind of get everybody in a room and discuss the challenges. He's basically identified what he thinks is the right solution and wants to start working towards the right solution. Now, the right solution is to basically take this zoning issue up to the county level and have a county zoning overlay as it relates to the airport. This is what Mason County has done, and this is what the state recommends, because the zoning, the area that the state wants you to control is a 10-mile radius around the airport, which is not only the township we live in, it is a
5 miles
significant-
each way from
No,
here.
no,
10 miles each way?
yes. So now, as you get farther away, the heights get to the point that it's really
Irrelevant.
not an issue, but again, that's what the state recommends. Now, when you do get in closer, there are places to the east of us that would be impacted that are outside of Manistee Township. So again, that's Rob's desired approach. So his plan is to bring this up at the County Planning Commission at their next meeting. And he's already anticipating that Richard Schmidt is going to be pushing back on it, because I guess he and Richard have had this conversation in the past. But anyway, that's the approach he's moving forward, is trying to start it from that level. My follow-up to him on that plan is, and one of the reasons I kind of wanted to get people just together to talk about this, is that is all in fine for all of the county jurisdictions with the exception of the tribe. So, given tribal proximity to the airport, they need to be a partner in this. Obviously, anything that a township is doing or the county is doing is not going to directly apply, even though they may be in agreement of adopting similar zoning issues as it relates to the airport. But clearly, they're not going to submit to the whatever the right word is that escapes me right now, of the township or county. So even if this county approach, there's still then a second track that has to happen with the tribe, to make sure that everything is really
Isn't
meets the
this-
needs of the airport.
Isn't this more of a formality because of the airport? It's almost like a supremacy clause, because all we're concerned about is height requirements for zoning.
No, it's not. From a federal standpoint, the FAA creates essentially, I'll say, the rules, saying these are what should be enforced, but the FAA and the feds do not do any of the enforcement. They leave it to the state as to how the state wants to enforce their recommendations. So let's say the casino builds a 500-foot tower directly in the flight path of our north-south runway. They could do that, and the FAA would say, that's not a good idea, we're gonna shut down your runway. So they will impose restrictions on the airport in relation to activities around it, but they will not enforce things that protect the airport. They leave that to the state.
So basically, it's just a matter of a simple overlay stating the fact that the airport is there, so we need to be cognizant of that with our approvals within
Right.
that zone.
Right.
Yeah, that
It's-
shouldn't be that big a deal.
But again, there's, well,
I'm
there's,
here, I mean,
I-
from what I understand the tribe, the reason why the tribe built the hotel the way it's built very goofy
Right.
from an operational standpoint, and frustrates the hell out of me, is because,
Of the
Yes.
airport.
because of the airport.
right.
And
So I
the
mean,
only thing coming in the pipeline right now is the development of the corner of M22, which I guess the chamber, I don't know if they met with you at all, is pushing to have a brand name hotel added to the area. So they had me meet 2 weeks ago with some consultants for that, so I don't know if that's really gonna happen or where that's going at this point in time, but if you really wanted a brand name hotel, they're probably gonna wanna go at least 1 floor, if not 2 floors higher
Yes.
than what
right.
we're at.
And what I've heard is one of the locations that is being looked at is adjacent to airport property. So, now, there are certainly desirability of having a brand name hotel adjacent to an airport.
Yeah, happens all the time.
But again, going up that
It's
hill,
the
you
flight
start
path.
having, yes, so,
Now, this development would be across, on the corner of M22 and 31, across from tribal government.
okay. Again, as it was explained to me, is one of the options being looked at was between the gas station and airport property on the opposite side of,
That would be new.
Nicer to build on.
That would be new to me. I mean, the elevations there are much harder to deal
Yeah,
with than
that's what I
across the
would-
street.
would think, but,
That's correct.
Plus the wetlands.
Oh, I guess across the street
actually, we own the wetlands, it's beyond that.
across the street where you're talking about, I believe the deceased vet used to have his office there.
It's on the other side of that, it's where the old migrant, housing.
Oh, okay, out
It's-
there.
If this is 31, this is 22, we're talking right here.
Okay.
Are you talking up front, in front of the casino?
No.
No,
No,
okay, oh,
no,
you're
on the
on
other
Head-
side
head-
of
head
22.
north on 31.
That's
It's
where-
not north there, but it's north on 31.
So I guess there's a portion of the local government lobbying the tribe to put in housing, and then another portion that's lobbying for this brand name hotel.
So which is gonna win?
No clue, because the analysis from the outside consultant is about 3 months past due.
Oh, okay.
So now they're saying maybe by May we'll get the report.
That's not a good sign.
I think the airport did have an effect on where the water tower that the tribe has was located and the height.
I'm not worried about that, I just don't
Yeah,
know
I
about
know.
our hotel, it's just, it's very inefficient.
So, I mean,
Never
what I would
realized that.
say is that the tribe has certainly shown a willingness to work with the airport to make sure that they're not impacting us adversely, and I don't anticipate that to be a challenge, but I'm also aware of their sovereignty issues and wanna make sure that I'm following a proper course to get their
I
buy-in.
should put a caveat on that. Under the current leadership, I don't envision any problems, but if
It's,
leadership changes in April, then
possibilities exist, yep.
And why would they wait to bring the tribe in? I mean, you know, if you go, why not have them at the table at the beginning and stuff?
Because I think Rob believes that there's going to be, it's going to be a challenge to get the county to kind of go in this direction because it's not traditionally been a direction that's been supported.
Okay.
So he wants to tackle that issue first.
Any further comments on airport zoning? Otherwise, solar projects, anything there?
There's nothing there, and really that whole field is kind of quieted down. I would recommend we take that off of
Go
the
ahead,
list because I don't anticipate
really,
we're
in
going
my
to
mind,
have.
I cannot picture a solar panel system and the amount of overcast skies we have on this side of the lake and so on. I really can't picture it.
has there been any updates on the project out at Heathlands?
It's ongoing, they're gonna be swinging golf clubs up there for the summer, from what I
Oh.
understand. But the program's still in play, is what I'm told.
See what they have there.
I've already given you an
Okay.
update on the
Okay.
TSA
Well,
lease.
take the solar projects off the future agenda. Go ahead, Barry.
I've given you an update on the TSA lease, and then we've also already talked about the status of the audit, so.
Okay. Comments by members? Anybody?
It's more of a personal question, Barry. Are you hearing anything that's going on with Southwest? Southwest has really been odd this year, to a point where I've been flying them for 5 years, and now this week, March and April, I'm flying United because what they're doing down in Grand Rapids is just insane.
No, I have not.
They've jacked up their fares, they've changed their schedules, almost every week you go in, their schedules are not what they used to be.
Well, what I will tell you that I know is Grand Rapids is probably the smallest airport in the country that Southwest serves. And generally, it doesn't fit their normal model. So they've been trying a lot of different approaches to try to make it work for them.
Almost every flight's sold out though, but now it's
But
like,
it-
it's like they're like chasing guests away.
But again, a lot of, I mean, at least one of, I mean, I don't even know what their current iteration is, but they adopted a model where they are basically just going down to Chicago
And they didn't used to do that, I used
And
to
they
be
didn't
able to
used to
get
do
a direct flight
that.
to Denver.
to get the flights full, but from a cost structure, those short hops are really exorbitantly inefficient. So I think that's part of it, is you may have full planes, but at the fares they're charging, it's not effective, so I think that's part of what's going on from what I know.
I know there's more concern out of people in trying to get that 1,000-foot runway, try to help us out into the future. It's not, you know, it's not just gonna be this board if we wanna start pursuing that, I can assure you that.
Any other comments?
Since we're talking Southwest
Okay.
and indirectly Grand Rapids, Grand Rapids last year saw about a 15% growth in their total passengers. And if they continue growing at that rate, within the next 5 years, they will become what the FAA calls a mid-sized airport as opposed to a small airport. And once that happens, restrictions on our grant, our EAS grant funding come into place because of our proximity to a mid or large size airport. Not only does it impact us, it would drastically impact Muskegon because Muskegon would no longer be eligible for subsidy. So, you know, it's just,
Unless they change the rules.
unless they change the rules, or actually enforce the rules, because that's been, you know, there are many airports that are subject to those restrictions that get waivers year after year, so.
A couple weeks ago when I flew out of there, it was the first time this had happened. The TSA agent actually thanked me for not using Manistee. So when he checked my ID and saw I live in Manistee, he's like, oh, thank you for driving down and not using the Manistee airport.
Yeah.
That's a strange comment.
That's why it says, first time that would have ever happened to me.
I may have to put in a complaint to my contacts at TSA, because our TSA is, basically management is in Grand Rapids, so instruct your people not to
I would say they should be
encourage
neutral,
people.
they aren't,
Yeah, I don't know what difference, what relevance it would be to them.
I don't know either. Their paycheck is a paycheck.
That airport has been going and going and going.
Okay, motion for adjournment,
Make a motion to adjourn?
second? Meeting adjourned.
I've got 30 minutes if you need them. If you wanna do it.